Let's Take a Moment for Youth. This podcast is brought to you by the Wheelock College of Education and Human Development Center for Future Readiness at Boston University. My name is Scott Solberg, and I'm joined by
Annie Bell.
And Trey Venkatesan.
Boy, we're going to have to work on that timing, guys.
Well, I wasn't sure if Trey should go first. I realized I didn't ask.
That's right, because you're not here physically today, so
Yeah.
you don't get those little cues. Okay, first
Right.
time we're trying with a phone access. This is awesome. Okay, the Take a Moment series is designed to explore innovations that create opportunities for all children and youth to develop their full potential. Our podcast is designed for those of you who are interested in or currently working in schools, community-based organizations, and we're looking for concerned parents and caregivers looking for ideas and resources. Annie, why don't you tell us about today's topic?
Absolutely. So, in honor of November being Global Careers Month, which is a big yay, our next few podcast episodes will focus on international efforts to support access to quality career development programs and services. Today, we are discussing an OECD report that addresses this very topic.
All right. Well, what can you tell us about this report?
So, the Program for International Student Assessment, also known as PISA, is a large-scale cross-national survey administered every 3 years by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, also known as OECD. This survey evaluates the knowledge, skills, and attitudes of 15-year-old students. The 2022 PISA report included over 80 countries, which represents 38 OECD member countries and 43 partner countries. So, while the PISA survey is best known for assessing academic competencies in reading, mathematics, and science, it also includes optional questionnaires that explore students' career aspirations, guidance experiences, and future readiness. So, again, the survey is administered every 3 years, and then roughly for about 3 years, data is released on different focuses from the survey. So 2022 is the most recent survey that has results reported, and we actually just passed the administration period for the 2025 survey, and results from that will start coming out in 2026.
All right. So, such an interesting survey because it's not only looking at the academic performance outcomes, it's now asking questions about career readiness.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be fun to kind of look through those. Now, I thought the reason why we'd kind of go through this report is just to see how well we're doing. It's not really a happy conversation as we like to have, right?
Yeah.
Because there's some things that we need to work on. But it is nice to have an international perspective. And so,
For sure.
So Shrey, what are you kind of seeing? Why don't you start us off with what some of the results
Yeah.
that are in the report?
So we have a lot of work to do. So some
Not just our center, I hope. You're talking about international.
internationally, yes.
Everybody.
Because we know we have a lot of work to do in our center. That's a whole other topic.
Yeah, but there were very interesting findings. So while over 60% of students report having completed some kind of questionnaire about their interests and skills, only 55% reported having access to a career professional. And less than half report participating in specific activities.
Yeah.
So these activities can include like visiting a workplace or participating in job shadowing or internships and attending a job fair or a workplace learning activity, things like that, right?
Yeah.
And this just kind of goes to show how much like internationally that monetary resources matter at the end of the day to access a lot of these workplace and career resources.
Yeah, I think in context, right, the OECD countries are considered the wealthier countries and so should have systems, or many do. There's no doubt that we have some phenomenal systems out there. As we start looking at lower income and middle income countries, it starts to get more challenging, as one would expect. But what's interesting in the study is just even within, if you are coming from a low income household, you're receiving a lot less access to quality guidance services.
Right.
And even though we know that the impact it has for lower income youth, youth of color, youth with disabilities, usually the services are showing twice the impact for those individuals. They have so much more that they can gain out of this. So that's one of the disturbing, I think, things that we find in there. One of the data points that OECD had is that 1 in 3 students who are living in low-income households show career misalignment, meaning they think they've got all the education pathways ready to go into a particular area, but they're off. They're not understanding the actual training and education needs to be able to pursue goals that they might have. 1 in 10 1 in 10 students in higher income households have that misalignment. So when you have 1 in 3 on the low income side and only 1 in 10 on the higher, there's something missing in the conversation and in terms of some of the just
Mhm.
understanding of how this whole thing works. So what OECD concludes, which is I think an important point that they've made, is that social background is now a strong determinant of educational and career ambition, more so than academic ability. So even though you have high performing students, they're high performing, but if they're from a low income background, they expect less of their future. They'd have lower aspirations for their future, and it's a challenge because even lower performing peers and wealthier families have stronger aspirations and such, right? So
Yeah.
there's some issues there. We have talent. How are we helping to really optimize their opportunities to pursue occupations that really align well with it and make sure they get access to the education and training they need to get there? So
Right.
that's a significant issue that we often come back to a lot, right? Because that's where the issue is. How are we
Yeah.
helping those youth that are otherwise not getting access to the kind of quality opportunities that they need? Annie,
Mhm.
what are your thoughts?
Well, I just wanted to sort of pull off of the comment that you just made about aspirations and how it differs from students from low income backgrounds versus wealthier families. And I do think that one thing that I would say at BU we have started to talk about a little bit, thanks to Dr. Anthony Jacks coming on as faculty. But another thing is that students sort of don't know what they don't know. And if you have, wealthy and or highly educated parents, they have an awareness of the post-secondary education system, but can differ and can kind of give you a little bit of a leg up because you kind of know what office hours are, or about like taking your professor out to coffee, or the importance of additional conversations outside of class and email, etc. And so I think that there is definitely social background factors, that determine ambition. And I'm glad that we're talking about it both nationally and internationally
Yeah,
because it plays such an important role, I think,
right.
in how ambitious and prepared students feel
Yeah.
when they do begin to pursue a career or higher education.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And so,
Um,
so let's, that
mhm.
other piece that I know you're going to go into now, Annie, which is critical,
Yeah.
is just the whole level of uncertainty about the future, but also
Yeah.
mismatch, right? In terms of,
Hmm.
you know, when we think about the labor market, are we looking at the
Right.
opportunities, or are we saying, oh, I'm going to do something for which there may be few jobs, right? And now with
Mm-hmm.
AI coming
Hmm.
in, that becomes an important consideration as well.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, a strong labor market in whatever your sort of dream career path is the best way to ensure that you always have a job.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes factoring in how many positions there are tied to whatever your passion or your dream career is just as important as deciding which career or degree you want to get,
Mm-hmm.
just being able to ensure that there are jobs there. So from this report, roughly one third, so 39% of students are classified as career uncertain, which is up pretty sharply, I believe, since 2018. Um, and across the board, their job aspirations remain concentrated in a pretty narrow band of high status professions,
Right.
which um, is actually disconnected from the actual labor market demand.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
on average, 58% of OECD students aspire to quote unquote professional occupations, though there's only a fraction of available jobs in that professional occupation category. So, there's a mismatch between the students that are aspiring to those jobs than there are available jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And this suggests career education systems that don't provide adequate labor market literacy to students,
Mm-hmm.
which is sort of like another big whole piece to the pie of what career development is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
So yeah,
I think
very
that's an
important.
interesting term, labor market literacy.
Yep.
And I
Hmm.
think we have to always remind ourselves too that in some of our economies, OECD has strong formal economies, lots of
Hmm.
access to different decent work types of opportunities. But we have
Yeah.
many countries where it's a stronger informal labor market. And so when we
Hmm.
start talking about what labor market means, it also means how do I generate income through entrepreneurship and through some of these other
Yeah.
informal market opportunities and care work that we might be doing. So we need to be open
Hmm.
to recognizing that it's not the same landscape, and
Yeah.
and even having
Right.
that kind of accurate information across different cultures, communities, and systems we can't count on it all the time, right? So we have to be thinking in those terms. But it is
Yeah.
interesting that that this idea that youth have very narrow, and I think parents are also part of that too, right? That parents
Yes.
have ideas and aspirations, but what do they know about the world of work, right? Well, what they see science, they see, medicine, they see business, they see these kind of high-end professional opportunities, but there's a whole bunch of other ones that pay well and often offer decent work opportunities as well that we need to expand into and be thinking about.
Yeah, definitely.
So Shrey, what about school learning in all of this, and what's the report saying about that?
Yeah, so I want to talk about how, like my experience and my peers' experience in India while we go into this,
Yeah.
just to see what the parallels are.
Hmm.
So, in like you said earlier, in India, there are such narrow pathways, right? Like there are other pathways, but it seems like there are
Hmm.
such narrow pathways. So either you can be a doctor or an engineer, or else you're not successful in the society. Like, and there are so many people. Like when I grew up, everybody said, "Oh, I want to be a doctor," and now like over 50% of my class, graduating class, are in medicine,
Wow.
which is crazy.
Hmm.
And because people are not aware of the other avenues that are there. And most of these people also want to go there for like the happiness of their families,
Hmm.
because in their eyes of the family, like that's the only successful pathway that they could take,
Right.
right? And so the report also says there is a weak integration between school learning and work preparation.
Hmm.
So that is to say, a lot of students, like 33% of students across OECD countries, say school has not taught me anything useful for a job, which is so interesting because it is a requirement that you need to get a job.
Yeah, there's that, but I think what they're saying though too, right, is they just don't see the relevance of what they're learning,
Right.
and
Mm-hmm.
that's a challenge. If you don't see the relevance, then why am I here?
Exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Because that kind of just throws you into an existential dread
Hmm.
of what am I doing here?
Well, I know
Yeah.
hearing college students say, "Oh, I don't have any skills. I just got a college degree." It's like, well, you do, but no
Right.
one's explained or provided opportunity for
Mm-hmm.
you to explore what those skills are that you're getting in this space, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
That just goes on to show how career education often begins too late,
Hmm.
right? So many programs start at the end of schooling, while OECD emphasizes that effective systems begin early and continue throughout
Hmm.
education.
Yeah, no,
Mhm.
I think, we've talked about some of the work that we've done and working with PBS Kids to provide
Mm-hmm.
kind of social media to young children around
Yeah.
their opportunities. And not so much that it's never about choosing a career, it's about learning and getting excited about the world that has so
Mm-hmm.
many different possibilities, and trying to help youth realize they can pursue those and they can look at their natural interests and they can begin thinking about how they can apply those in these different settings, right?
Right.
Yeah, but so I
Mhm.
do think that this idea of lifelong access from beginning all the way through adulthood is really a critical theme that
Mm-hmm.
goes through it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So another area that is always been a challenge and
Mm-hmm.
still continues to be a challenge is helping youth get access to role models. And a previous OECD report showed that when youth have meaningful career conversations, their future wage earnings go up.
Mm-hmm.
So 15-year-olds getting access to someone who's encouraging, says, wow, this is exciting. And so this is kind of stuff you can do, and these are the ways in which you can apply these skills. Just having that extra little bit has meaning. It helps them set up an identity that I belong here.
Yeah.
And so that whole idea of certainty isn't just that I have a plan or the exact career, but I belong somewhere, right? That's what we're
Right.
trying to get, that I do belong in this world of work. So this is a big issue, trying to find ways to get our business community engaging with youth. And right now, the reports are continuing to show that participation rates are really low.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're going to help youth kind of start building their own social capital, right, they
Yeah.
need real world insights into these careers. And we also have to
Mhm.
we have to keep fighting around gender and social stereotypes,
Right.
right? We have to get role models
Mm-hmm.
that are in these positions, in these places, so that youth can realize, oh, it is possible. I
Right.
can think of myself in these spaces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Any thoughts on that? Did anyone did either of you have any employment related interactions when you were in school before college and maybe even during college?
Not particularly,
No?
not in when I was in school, but in college around my third year.
Hmm.
I think I mentioned this before in one of our earlier episodes, but just for people who are just coming in,
Hmm.
I was a part of this fellowship called Leadership Bravery, and this fellowship is for students of color in the greater Boston area getting access to higher education, right? And a lot of our events was just about social networks and how to build it. And then a lot of our events were also surrounding people of color in those professions and how they got there and how to connect with them. So most of us and all of us saw how people who look like us are in those positions, and it is possible. It's not just old white people sitting there, you
Right,
know.
right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And that's just the issue when we talk about students of color, youth of color, when we talk about from low-income backgrounds,
Right.
youth with disabilities, we've got to find a way to get them connected to these role models. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting too is in your particular cases, I'm thinking about it, learning how to connect in that social network and how to build on that social network also tells you a little bit that what the expectations are for engaging. And you mentioned things, I think, Annie, you were talking about the idea of you can actually have coffee with a professor. You can
Right.
actually, you can
Mhm.
email and expect people will respond, right? I mean, those are
Right.
weird things to
Yeah.
think about if you've never had any exposure to it, right?
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's that sort of like unspoken, I'm forgetting the actual term, but it's like the unspoken curriculum sort of thing where
Right.
like there are certain students that just know when they come into college and they just know these things and they don't really remember how they learned them, but it was probably through a parent, a caregiver, an older sibling who'd figured it out, or even a mentor, who said, this is what office hours are. This is, you'd sort of dress for success and meet your professor for coffee, like whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Um, and again, like it's not a reflection on the student coming in, they don't know what they don't know. It's just a fact. And then it's something that as like a higher ed system or as a college or as freshman class mentors, those are things that we want to sort of cover, even if it seems obvious. Say
Right.
the thing,
Right.
that seems obvious, because it may
Yeah.
not be obvious to someone. And if it seems obvious to everybody else, they may not feel comfortable to ask,
Right.
Right.
That's right.
Exactly.
And I think that's another thing, is sort of bringing everybody into the fold in a way that doesn't make them feel like the odd one out who doesn't know.
Yeah.
It may be repetitive for others and not for everybody. And so repeat the thing, whatever it may be.
Yeah, it's
Definitely.
naming it, and
Yeah.
directly, thinking about it because, one of our
Mm-hmm.
one of our colleagues that came and visited us for a year at the very end, as they're getting ready to go, they go, "What do people mean when they say how's it going? What am I
Yeah.
supposed to say? How do we work with that?" And
Mm-hmm.
I felt so bad because it's just a whole year's gone by, and they've
Yeah.
been in these situations not knowing what is those words, what the expectations. Do you
Right.
say great, and then they just
Mm-hmm.
ignore whatever was said? It's like, yeah, it's kind of it is odd. These are like
Right.
local cultural colloquialisms and things,
Yep.
right? That
Yeah.
unless we are working to become aware of it, and until we're faced with people that are not in that space,
Yeah.
asking those questions, it's like, oh, I didn't realize it's
Right.
unspoken, it's just assumed. Driving practices in
Mm-hmm.
Boston, that's a whole nother set of rules that nobody. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't teach that in classes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Right.
It's not possible
it's
to.
not possible. Exactly. But every community has those kinds of things, whether it's in driving, whether it's how you go to the market, and don't touch the food in
Mm-hmm.
some markets, and some markets you do. I mean, there's just so many different hidden rules that go on.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
so we have to really name them and figure out what those are as we go forward.
For sure.
Absolutely.
So Andy,
Absolutely.
what were their big recommendations at the end of the day for this coming from this report?
Well, so OECD released 5 recommendations to sort of help us figure out what work comes next around the world. And one thing that I think is really important, and we sort of touched on, is that career guidance needs to begin early. So starting in primary school and then continuing throughout the rest of their
Yeah.
education, all the way through when they make that post-secondary decision.
Yeah, let's stop on that one
Um,
for just a second, because I
yeah.
think that's such a critical point. Again, we're not saying that
Hmm.
they should be choosing careers. We just said
No.
that students don't see the meaningfulness of school. Why am I in school? So
Right.
we have to help them
Hmm.
see that there are these things called jobs, right? And in those jobs, there are skills. And a lot of those
Hmm.
skills align with what we're learning in school. And not just the math and science and reading, it's also those social emotional skills, right? It's the
Right.
ability to
Hmm.
communicate with people, to work with others, some leadership skills and things like that that grow in. And then also
Well,
growing in our own technical skills out of this. Yeah, Annie?
hmm I was gonna say, and also, especially speaking towards the primary school
Mhm.
sort of awareness, it's the ability to see someone who looks like you, even just through a children's picture book,
Mhm.
in whatever it is kind of job that they have that you could also do,
Absolutely.
you know. And so I think that also touches on the equity and the access and just being able to visually see someone who looks like you doing a job that you could also do,
Exactly.
as a young girl. That's a really empowering thing
Mhm.
to
Mm-hmm.
see, all of a sudden being an astronaut isn't a totally insane, impossible, out of this world idea,
Yeah.
because there is a woman who's an astronaut in a book, and that's something that you realize that you can aspire to.
Yeah. Well, and I think we also have to make it more localized for you personally, Eddie, right? It's really
Hmm.
that F1 racer and engineer is female so that you could have other career
Yes.
pathways given your love of F1 racing. So, yeah,
Yeah.
right?
I spent a lot of Sundays in my childhood designing go-karts that I wanted to build with my dad because I
Yeah.
wanted to be the first female F1 driver.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a house where we weren't Sunday football, we were Sunday Formula One.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And
And so
now
from
it must be awesome to see so many women now moving
it
into
is.
the
It
engineering
is.
roles, the driving roles,
Mm-hmm.
things like that,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. F1 Academy and I were we're besties.
Mm-hmm. You're
Great
busy
to see.
and just upset that you were born too early. I get
I know. I know.
it.
I missed my chance by about 5 years, but
All
that's
right.
okay. I will cheer them on always.
No.
Um,
But I think,
but
but that's the
speaking
whole
of
point,
that,
though. I just want to say, I mean, that is the point. Is we have to have these role
yeah.
models, right? To help us
Mm-hmm.
out.
Hmm.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. But then also speaking of that, so many Formula One teams as employers have started to engage with young people.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So the second recommendation from OECD was that we need more employer engagement. And that is in person and virtual. So there's
Mm-hmm.
sometimes instances where there isn't an employer in the area, but you still want to bring them in to speak with students. And that is so, so important and so worthwhile.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of
Um,
the models that came out of COVID were really exciting because they
mhm,
started more virtual internships.
right.
But they also, in
Mhm,
Wisconsin, one of my colleagues started setting up a large statewide conversation that was led by students
Mm.
to interview
mhm,
employers about their different occupations and the different pieces going there.
Yeah.
And the
yeah.
schools from around the state started listening in because it was such an exciting piece. But I think that
Mhm,
student-led process that we can do in a virtual environment is
absolutely.
powerful. So it doesn't have to be a huge. I mean, job fairs are fantastic, right? But there's other things we
Hmm.
can do to get those touches, and I think
Right.
the virtual is an area we really need to continue looking into. Let's see.
Definitely. And it also helps students find their voice, and realize I can walk into a room and ask an employer questions,
Right.
Yes.
and
Mm-hmm.
learn from them. And it's not just them sort of talking at me and I'm just absorbing.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
have sort of some agency,
Mm-hmm.
in this process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we need to make sure our employers are ready for that because it's the
Hmm.
inspiring comment that they can make that
Yeah.
can make all the
Yeah.
difference in terms of
Oh,
students,
absolutely.
getting excited.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So third recommendation was expanding access to virtual and in-person work-based learning
Mm-hmm.
experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Again, giving them that professional experience, both online and in person as available. Fourth recommendation is to empower schools and communities to tell their story about how their career development efforts are transforming students' lives. So when
Yeah.
they're
Mm.
successfully doing this,
Mm-hmm.
share that with people. People want to learn, people want to emulate, what is successful.
Yeah,
Right.
I think that's
Um,
great. And I think, one of the things we want to
mhm.
make sure we put on our resource list for this episode is what Boston Public Schools did in this space. So they've recorded the teachers, the
Mhm.
students
Mm-hmm.
talking about their
Yeah.
experiences, right? And it's the kind of thing that's so powerful because you're hearing from youth,
Yeah.
right? And it's communicating that this is the kind of students we're looking for. Look at how
Right.
engaged they are.
Mm-hmm.
Look at how connected they are to their learning and their pathways and their future.
Mhm.
So it's not just about data that says, oh, they're performing better in school. They will be when they have purpose and meaning and a sense of hope. They
Yeah.
are going to perform better in school.
Right.
But what does that feel like,
Mhm.
right? What does it look
Mm-hmm.
like? And so I do think we need more efforts to help tell the story.
Yeah.
Don't think of it as research and
Mhm.
evaluation. It's the story. What is the story we're trying to tell? So,
Right.
great stuff.
Yeah. So then the final fifth recommendation was to ensure that career development policies are established and aligned to education ministries, labor agencies, and employers so that there is a national sort of lifelong guidance
Mm-hmm.
system
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's in alignment, everybody's in conversation, nobody is siloed doing one thing on their own. And I think essentially that is shown to be more successful and
Yeah.
more beneficial to students doing it that way.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we're going
So
to
I
be
think that's a
using,
really important one.
we'll be using ecosystem as sort of a thought about that, right? That we're trying
That's a
to
great
we're
way.
trying to have a cross section of those different ministries, the different
Right.
parts of our community that are working with youth or that invested
Mm-hmm.
in youth, and so we will talk more
Mm-hmm.
about some specific ideas on that in our upcoming podcasts. But I did want to say though that too, policies are really interesting because there's the policy that will say we need to do this,
Yeah.
and then there's the policy that says how are we going to do it, right? And I look at those as the implementation policies, defining the concepts, explaining what these things are about and why they're important, but then also having access to the resources so we can actually deliver the services.
Right.
And so we do need, it's not just getting the ministries to agree on the plan, it's also providing down to the educators, the community-based organizations, parents,
Yeah.
the kinds of resources they need to really involve themselves in it and really be a part of that. So
Right.
those are some big things. So just some of the caveats then from this talk. One, we're not saying that a primary school, they're out there to find their own career and get it. What we are saying is that by learning about the world of work, they get excited about a future. By focusing on the sustainable development goals, for example, they realize there's problems in their community that are actually global.
Yeah.
And what are the things that I might want to get into and try to, through civic engagement and other creative solutions to address. And we'll talk about someone in our next podcast that actually did that and was able to create a nice company for his community around that. So, other areas of transformation that we see in this space as well when we start helping students kind of engage and come up with hope is going from a low performing student, right, to a high performing student when they realize that there's something out there they really like. We've seen students who get excited about the health career areas, right?
Right.
And so when they realize and start working as a dietitian aide, that opened up a whole new world in the hospital to see all of these occupations, and they came back to school and started doing more of their science and math so they could bring their grades up,
Yeah.
but also really started thinking about nursing. And when they wrote about when they wrote to the college to say why they wanted to be a nurse, it was quite persuasive because it's coming from their heart, it's
Yeah.
coming from a lived
Yeah.
experience, and you can see that even if their grades as freshmen and sophomore the first couple years in high school were great, their junior and senior grades were great. The courses they were taking, their trajectory is in the pathway, but also leadership-wise, this is the person we want to invest in, right? And this individual was actually able to get full scholarship to go to nursing.
Nice.
So, and we've seen other stories like that happening
Yeah.
all over the place. So our lower-income youth have potential, and we have to kind of lean into that. The potential's there. How do we optimize that potential in a way that they're now being more resilient, they're more adaptive, they're proactive, and let's help their parents the families really be invested with them along that process.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Shrey, should we close it down? Now let's get our timing right, gang. We're ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for taking a moment for youth. To access resources from today's conversation, go to our Center for Future Readiness YouTube channel, where you will find links to these resources and many more. And coming soon, we will have a resource portal for many more open access resources.
We hope you'll join us here on Take a Moment as we continue to discuss future readiness.
All right. So at our Wheelock College of Education and Human Development, we're looking for undergrad and graduate students who want to transform the lives of children and youth throughout the world. And as you can see, we're really excited about maintaining an international perspective on this and recognizing that we have a lot to learn, both from each other and to support each other around the world as we go through this. So as the co-director for our Center for Future Readiness, we're especially interested in those who want to become the next generation of school counselors. At Boston University, we have a wonderful school counseling program, and we're starting a career development, actually a degree in career counseling, so at the master's level and things like that. So
Exciting.
certainly reach out to us if you're interested.
Yep.
But for now, goodbye from me, Scott Solberg.
Goodbye from me, Shrey Venkatesan.
And goodbye for me, Annie Bell.
All right. Okay, gang.